Hello everyone, it's Naheem again. I'm back with another video. Today we will be talking about ASP.NET identity and how to customize it. So if you're watching this video, I'm sure you have an idea what ASP.NET identity is and what it is used for. So I was doing a project some time ago for a company and for one of the clients where I implemented ASP.NET identity, and I wanted to customize it because I wanted to write my own data access layer and retrieve user and role management and everything else. When you create a project, MVC project, by default, it gives you an option to create ASP.NET identity classes. You can choose. Let me just show it to you. So when you create a project, it gives you an option for MVC or any other project uh, authentication type. So if you choose individual user account, it will create ASP.NET identity, and by default they'll be using entity framework, and all the classes are implemented for you, so you won't really know what's going on in behind the scenes, because entity framework is managing all your users, creating, adding, updating. So I wanted to create my own data access layer, and I can actually write code to do it for me. So I looked around on internet. I hardly found anything which was helpful. There were some articles, how to customize it, but I couldn't really find code which I can just, copy paste and use it. So I started writing my own. That's where I decided to add this video today, because I'm sure some of you would be wondering as well how this works. So first of all, let me explain to you what these projects are. So first of all, the identity.web, as you can tell, it's a web project. So that's where our website lives, MVC application. And then we have API library, that is a logic layer basically, and that calls data access layer to talk to a database. And then we have identity library, which has all the classes coming from ASP.NET identity, and I've extended them with some functionality. So then we have the models, where all the models live, Proco objects like user object, and all other objects which you can just share across these libraries. Then service library. Basically, service library is at the moment I've got an email service in there which sends emails out for you. So I couldn't really find a place where to fit that in, so I just moved it into its own project. Let's get into it. So identity library. First of all, let me show you current user class. So that's a current user class with a static function. Well, two static functions. This one's private anyway. Your application basically says go to current user class and get the current user information. And then we look in HTTP context and we say if the user is authorized, that means we have a user logged in. And then we call this method passing in http context.current.user, which is I principal, and we cast it to a claims identity, and then we get the user ID and username, add the name, get user ID, claims identity, I principal. All this is part of the ASP.NET identity. The only thing which I added is custom claims. So I want to add more claims to it so I can use them when the application is running. So custom claims, I've split everything into separate classes, just making it easy to read basically. So in custom claims, I have a full name, first name, last name, username, active, profile picture. These are my custom claims which I'm going to be storing for a given user. And this big URL, this is the convention used by Microsoft for storing their custom claims or any other claims. So I just did a copy paste and change the names, so that'll make it very unique in your application. So Custom claims, that's how you retrieve them. You have the claims identity which you have casted from iUser, which you have casted iUser to, and then you say find first and you get your claims. And if you have multiple with the same, you can say find all, and then it would give you INenumerable. And this one, as you can see, is a boolean, so we can pass it back to a bool, and then it will give you app user information. And if we don't have a current user logged in, we return a default user, uh, which is just I followed a convention, like at all time I want to have a user available, and we use the default user if the user is not logged in. So if you go to first of all, let me tell you all of these classes. ASP.NET Identity already implements them. I'm using my own, so that's why I used my keyword in front of them, just to be clear and make it easy for you to know as well which classes we are implementing. So if you look in the sign-in manager, it inherits from SignIn Manager, which is ASP.NET Identity class. We tell it, if you look at it, it's a generic class. So we tell it what type of user we're going to be using and what will be the key for that user. So I'm telling it my user would be of type my user and the key would be of type string. So at this point, if you look at my user, this is my user class. It inherits from user class and it also implements iUser, which is ASP.NET Identity interface. And string, we just use the same type which we have used in sign-in manager. And it has two properties. One is a generic t key. So if you say string, then the key would be of type string, and then username. These needs to be implemented, which are implemented in iUser. So we have ID and we have username, and other properties which are not part of ASP.NET Identity, but you create your own properties. So these are my other properties. Um, yeah, if you come back to sign-in manager, when we register it, when we register the sign-in manager, I've got a static method which I use, which will be called from, I think it's being called from app start event of my web application. So it creates a context. In this context, it will give us my application sign-in manager. So we will use this everywhere else, and then this function would be used when we create a identity async. So when we create a user, this would call function generate user identity async, uh, which would actually create the user and add the claims to it. In the previous class, we've seen how to retrieve, and now we are adding claims. So we are adding custom claims. I've just had it as part of my user class because it's easy. You just say get the first name from that, or if you want to have in a separate class, you can do that. So that's my application sign-in manager. If you look at the user manager, again, it's a static function which would be called from the web application, which I will show you in a minute, which would create the context, and it has password hasher, and I'm using my own password hasher. I'll give you the reason why. Might as well tell you now. I'm using my own password hasher. It's called bcrypt. It's a NuGet package. Um, the reason why I'm using my own password hasher is because then I can reuse it with other applications. For example, if you're using ASP.NET identity and then you're calling the same functionality API library from a WinForm application which does not have these classes to support. So if you have your own password hasher, it is very easy to reuse your hashed password. So I can make use of this function, verify hash password, and I can call it from a WinForm application or anything else. So this would support it. That's why I'm using my own password hasher. So coming back to application user manager. So this would create an instance of my application user manager, and this would be used everywhere else in our application. So the next one I want to show you is my email service. So it inherits from identity messaging service. It has a method send async, and it receives a message of type identity message. I have extended identity message class to be used as my identity message class. So you can, just for this demo, I extended it so you can have more properties on it. For example, you can have a string. Let's say you want to have a message type, for example. So when you cast it, you will have a message type available to you. So you can extend it further if you uh, want more information passed in. So let me just undo this. So when a user is registered, we send an email out, and that's why we need my email. So you can use it for sending any type of email. If you look at identity message, it gives you three properties: destination, subject, and body. And destination will be the email which you pass in from the front end or anywhere else where you wanna use this. And subject and body, it will give you option to pass all of that in. And then I've written another function called send email, where I cast this to my identity message, and I send an email out. If you look at this, basically in initialization, I set these properties: port, host, password, and all that, and then it is basically just sends an email out. At this point, let me show you SMS Service class, which is again, it takes the same object. You can extend this one or use the my identity extended message as well. And I think this has the same properties, yeah. And the destination would be a phone number, I guess, and when you're using a message wise, I think it would be a phone number. And yeah, email or SMS phone number, it would be it would be a phone number when you use it with SMS service. So you can plug in your class here which is capable of sending SMSs out. So getting back to where we were, my user, let me show you my user quickly. Well, we have seen how we add claims to it, and it has all other properties. And IUser, it implements IUser, which is required for this class to be used for in the context of what type of user you want to use. So it has to implement IUser. And then finally we come to my user store. This is where all the magic happens. User service is my logic layer, which has all the methods which for getting user, registering user, all these methods. So I've implemented the IUserStore, IUserLogin store, IUserRole store, and all of these possible interfaces from ASP.NET Identity which I could find. I've implemented them here, and you see they all use the same two types: what the type of user we have and what is the key type. And I'm using string. There's a reason why I'm using string, because I can reuse this even with integer and GUID, because both of them can easily be casted to string. So if you look at IUserStore, for example, when you register user, we are registering the user here. Our application deals with my user object, but our data access layer and API layer, they deal with the user object. So we take information from my user and we pass it to the user object, and then we can pass this user object to our user service, which creates or registers the user. So if you look at, well, I've not implemented delete because when a user is logged in, he shouldn't be deleting himself. So there could be other way to do it. For example, your admin can do it, or if user wants to do it himself, you can basically say user.deleted is equal to and update that in the database. But I didn't want to do it at this point. If you look at find by ID, so user ID, since I'm using string, but as I told you, my IDs are type of integer. So when I get them here, I can easily cast them to an integer. And when I make a request to load a get user, it takes an integer. So we have an integer now. And if we find a user, um, we map the user and we return of my user type, because you remember our service deals with the user object, not my user object. So I've written a mark user object static function which takes a user object and converts it to a my user object. So you can use some NuGet package, or I think there's a automapper as well, but I just got one single class, so I just did it manually. If you look at find by ID, it gives you ID in a form of string. You can make use of that, convert it into an integer and return. Find by username, that's another method. It gives you username and use the same convention, same way to map your user, and then you can update your user. I didn't implement this because I don't have in the front end any object which updates the full user object, so I'm not implementing. However, I do have a method which updates the telephone number for a user. So it takes a telephone number, goes to the database and updates that. So I've implemented that, but I didn't need to update the full object. When we register a user, the email is not verified or confirmed by default, so the property for that would be null. So we have implemented something which would update that property. And these are other interfaces which I've implemented. Some of these were not required at this point. I'm not implementing locking down user after 3 or 4 attempts of wrong detail has been passed in. And these are very easy to implement, so you get the idea. We're just doing customization, so I didn't bother implementing them. Let's get back to the application. So now we're going to make use of those classes which I was showing you. If you look at the startup, in the config authentication, which obviously comes with when you do a single authentication type, when you create your object, it will give you these objects. I think it came with this but I'm using my own. So we create the context, and remember the static function we had in my application. This would create an instance of my application user with what password hash are we using, user validation rules, password validation, and all of the information, and it registers it in the startup, and then we can use it throughout the application. Same with SignIn Manager. Let's get back to the controllers now. So the account controller, that's where they will be used mostly. So let's look at the register function. Before that, if you look at this, we have a sign-in manager and we have a user manager. These we can use to make those calls to the database or our user store. Let's look at the register function. So when the user is registered, first thing we create a type of my user, because remember that's what our application is dealing with, and then in the background it will be converted to a user object when it's about to be passed into the data access layer or API layer. So our user manager takes a type of user, an object of user, and a password. And let's have a breakpoint and actually run this. So when we run the application and we register the user, we setting some default information for it, like for example security stamp. I'm just saying as to a quid. I didn't want to pass it as null, because you may pass it null on the other side, you might forget to set it, so it will be null. So you can have some null reference exceptions. But let's debug this. I think let's have a breakpoint on sending email as well, so I can show you the full registration process. So let's have a breakpoint here. Let's also have a breakpoint in IUserStore where we register the user, and also in find by username. So this would be called just to check whether there's a user already with the same email. So let's register. I'm going to be using one of my legit emails, so I can actually receive an email back from the application. So I'll put in my detail. Yes, random information. That's my actual email. I just use for these purposes. Let's put in a password. So when you register, your registered method gets called, and if the model is valid, then we make a call to the user manager and we say, well, create a user for us. Let me put a breakpoint here. So let's step in. First thing you would do is you would pass in the email, and it would confirm whether a user already exists with this email. So we return null because we don't have any user. So when you continue, it would come back and say, okay, I'm going to create a user now. So in the background, it has set all that information created on date. I think I'm setting it here. Okay, so that is not set. But other than that, we have most information: first name, last name, converted the full name. ID at this point is null because the database will give us an ID back. The password has been hashed using the my hash, so it converts it to a hash before saving, and all the other information, default ones, if you don't have one set already. So when you register the user and you come back, result is successful, so we have succeeded in registering the user. And then we say get user by email. Okay, this is directly calling the user service, is directly calling the data access layer. It's not through this user store. So let's just delete these breakpoints anyway. So then we say user manager generate email token, confirmation token. So it will give us a token back. We can use this token to send a confirmation email out to the user, which I will show you, which we will receive. And then we say we have a method called confirm email in accounts, and that's where we want to post this information back. And when the user clicks on this link from his email, that's where he will be redirected. And I'm creating the email message to be sent to model.email, which we have, and then the callback URL with the body of please confirm your account by clicking. You can write whatever you want, but I just wanted to keep it as simple. So now when you say email service, a user manager or email service sends email, we hit this point and we have all the information now, and then we can send the email. Yep, email is sent. Then we come back and let's have a breakpoint here. Just want to skip it. So yeah, once everything succeeded, we want to show a message to the user and continue. So its registration is done, email is sent. So now we should be redirected to home page. The message we see, registration successful. We have sent you an email. Please confirm the email address to complete your registration. Let's go to confirm your account. We did receive an email. So if I say enable the link and click, so it was posted to the same account confirm email. I should have had a breakpoint in there, but yeah, it has been confirmed now, so our email should be confirmed. So if you go back to the database, we should have email verified as well. Well, this is well, you can play around with it. I will be having, actually this code will be available on Git. I will give you a link to download it, and if you want to contribute to it, use it, whichever way you want, you are free to do so. So this is how you customize it. You can implement your Facebook or user login as Google login as well, which I didn't do in this tutorial, but it's very easy to do. There's some other tutorials available online, but I couldn't find a tutorial or anything on Google which actually implemented customized identity in such great details. So I had to write my own. So I thought I'll make it easy for you lot. I made a video on it. So if you like the video, just let me know. If you need some help, just send me a message. I will get back to you. So take care, guys. I'll hopefully soon see you again for another video. See ya.